I didn't plan on staying late that evening. The shop was already quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every tool sound louder than it should. A wrench hitting the concrete, the hum of the ceiling fan, the faint tick of the wall clock. I should have locked up, but the car on the lift wasn't just anyone's. It was hers. I remember the first time she walked in, maybe 3 weeks back. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, but not the kind that cut you down. More like the kind that look right through the part of you you didn't think anyone noticed. She wasn't dressed like someone trying to be noticed either. Hair tied up, dark blazer over a plain blouse, no extra polish. Still, the way she carried herself, confident, like she didn't need anyone's approval. That was the first thing. The second was her voice. Low, steady, but with this pause before each sentence, like she weighed her words against silence before letting them out. That night, she came back to pick up her car. I had grease on my shirt, a half-drunk coffee cooling by the counter. She walked in, the sound of her heels tapping against the concrete floor. The place suddenly felt too small, too bright, like she didn't belong in a workshop that smelled of oil and dust, but somehow she fit. "You stayed late," she said, almost like it wasn't a question. I wiped my hands on a rag that wasn't doing its job. "Didn't want you waiting another day." Her eyes lingered on me longer than most people ever do. Not a stare, something slower. It made me want to look away, but I didn't. That was the first moment I realized there was something unspoken between us. She walked around the car, fingertips brushing the edge of the hood like she was testing its surface. Most people don't go out of their way. You could have left it for tomorrow. I wanted to say something clever, something to match the way she made ordinary words sound important. Instead, all I managed was, "I don't like leaving things half done." She gave this half smile, not a real one, but the kind that tugs at one corner of the mouth like she doesn't want you to know she's amused. Then came the silence. That heavy, uncomfortable, magnetic pause that fills the air when neither person moves. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe 3 seconds, maybe 30. I only know my hand tightened around the rag, and I heard the fan whirring like it was the only sound in the world. "Why you?" she asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. Her tone wasn't suspicious, just curious. And before I could even think, I said it. "Because you chose me first." Her eyebrows lifted, just slightly. Not offended, not even surprised, just caught by the honesty of it. And maybe I was caught by it too, because I hadn't planned those words. They just fell out, raw and clumsy, like they'd been waiting somewhere in me. Another pause. She looked down at her hands on the hood, then back at me. Something unreadable passed across her face. Not quite approval, not rejection either. She didn't respond. She just reached for her car keys, her fingers brushing mine in the handover, deliberate or accidental. I couldn't tell. And then she left, heels tapping, the sound fading into the night air until the shop was quiet again. I stood there, the rag still in my grip, her words still circling in my head. Or maybe it was mine, the answer I gave without thinking. "Because you chose me first." I don't know why I said it, but I haven't stopped replaying it since. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. But 3 days later, there she was, standing at the counter while I was sorting receipts that never balanced. Her car wasn't in the lot. She wasn't holding any paperwork. She looked out of place again. "You left this in the back seat." She set a book down on the counter, an old paperback, creased at the spine. I didn't even remember leaving it there. "You came all the way back for that." She didn't answer right away, just smoothed her fingers across the cover before letting go. Her nails were short, unpolished. It struck me because I'd imagined them painted, neat, the way women like her usually keep them. But hers looked practical, real. "I was nearby," she said finally. I nodded, though I didn't believe her. Not fully. The shop was warmer that afternoon, sun pressing against the windows, dust catching in the air like it had nowhere else to go. She didn't sit, didn't lean against the counter, just stood there with this strange poise that made me feel like the kid in the room. "You read on lunch breaks?" she asked, glancing at the coffee-stained receipts. "Sometimes. Helps pass the quiet." Something flickered in her expression, a shadow that softened her face for a second. "Quiet can be heavy," she murmured. The words hung there, heavier than she probably meant them to be. She caught herself, pressed her lips together, and the guarded look returned, like a door being shut before I could peek inside. I wanted to ask what she meant. Instead, I asked, "Do you?" She tilted her head. "Read," I clarified. Her eyes stayed on me longer than they should have. Not as much anymore. She gave a faint laugh, the kind that doesn't really sound like laughter at all. Too tired by the time I get home. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Flat, with a thin crack beneath it. I noticed the faint smudge under her eyes, like sleep had been something she'd bargained away for years. For the first time, she wasn't composed. She was tired. Human. I reached for the book, sliding it back toward me. "Then you should borrow another." "I've got plenty." That earned me the smallest curve of her lips. Not quite a smile, not quite refusal. More like she wanted to, but didn't trust herself with the weight of wanting. Her phone buzzed in her bag, sharp against the quiet. She ignored it. Just let it ring until it stopped. That silence, chosen silence, filled the room with a strange current neither of us named. When she finally looked back at me, there was something softer in her gaze, something she didn't mean to give away. And then she said, almost too lightly, "You're observant. More than you should be." The words weren't meant as praise, but the way she avoided my eyes told me she knew I'd seen more than she wanted. Before she left, she touched the book again, fingertips grazing the cover as though it belonged to her now. And when the door closed behind her, the air in the shop felt charged, like she'd taken something with her, or left something behind. I still don't know which. It was raining the night she stayed longer than she meant to. The kind of rain that doesn't come down soft, but pounds on the roof until every word feels smaller against it. I was finishing up paperwork, trying to make the numbers align, when I noticed her standing by the open door, hesitant. "You'll get soaked," I said. She glanced at the parking lot, a blurred mess of headlights and water. I didn't think it would be this bad. I should have offered her an umbrella. Instead, I motioned toward the chair near my desk. "Stay until it slows." She hesitated, but stepped in. Her blazer was damp at the shoulders, hair falling out of its careful tie. She sat down like she wasn't used to waiting on anyone. For a while, we listened to the rain without talking. It filled the gaps where words usually stumble. Then she noticed the coffee mug I'd forgotten, half full, long cold. "You don't eat properly, do you?" she asked, tone halfway between scolding and amused. I laughed under my breath. "That obvious?" Her eyes softened, but just for a moment. "You remind me of someone I used to know." She caught herself, biting the inside of her cheek, and then shook her head. "Forget I said that." I wanted to press. I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Was he someone important?" That earned me silence. A different kind, not guarded, but heavy with things she wouldn't hand over. The rain thickened. She leaned back, arms folded, but her foot tapped lightly against the floor, a rhythm she didn't seem aware of. That small, restless movement told me more than her words. I found myself watching her hands. The way she twisted her ring, not a wedding band, just a thin silver circle that looked older than her blazer. She caught me looking, stilled her fingers, and the space between us felt suddenly narrower. Then, without thinking, I said, "You don't have to keep everything to yourself." Her eyes locked on mine, sharp at first, then searching. It was too much, too soon. I knew it the second her lips parted like she might answer. And then her phone lit up on the table. A name flashed across the screen. A man's name. She stared at it, not moving, not answering. The ring of it was loud against the rain. When it stopped, she turned the phone face down, slow and deliberate, and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. Neither of us spoke. My chest tightened with the urge to say something. To ask who he was, why she didn't answer, why her eyes suddenly looked like glass about to crack. Instead, I pushed the mug aside and muttered, "Coffee's terrible anyway." She let out a laugh, small, broken, but real. And in the middle of it, she looked at me, really looked, like I'd disarmed her without meaning to. Her hand brushed mine on the desk. Accidental. Or not. Neither of us pulled away. And just as I thought she might. Maybe, let it linger, she withdrew, stood up, and smoothed her damp blazer. "The rain's letting up," she said. But her voice trembled, just enough for me to hear it. The next time it happened, there was no rain, no excuse. Just the two of us, alone in the shop after hours again. She'd come to sign something for the car insurance. At least, that's what she told herself. Told me too. The paperwork was finished in 5 minutes. But she didn't leave. She stood by the counter, arms crossed, watching the second hand of the wall clock tick too loudly. I leaned back against the desk, pretending to check a form, but I wasn't fooling either of us. The air was different, thinner, tighter, like it was carrying a weight neither of us wanted to name. Finally, she broke the stillness. What are we doing? Her voice wasn't sharp. It was tired, frayed at the edges, like she'd held that question in for too long. I swallowed, though my mouth was dry. You mean? You know what I mean. She cut me off, but softly. Her eyes didn't move from mine. The clock kept ticking. I heard the hum of the fluorescent light above us. My chest felt too small. I wanted to say, nothing. We're doing nothing. You just come here for your car, for your errands, for reasons you can explain away. But I didn't, because it wasn't true. Instead, I muttered, I don't know. She tilted her head, studying me the way she studied the car she pretended not to care about. Searching for cracks, for weakness. Don't play innocent, she said. Not angry, not accusing, just stating a fact she wished weren't true. I pushed a hand through my hair, avoiding her gaze for the first time. I'm not playing. I stopped. Words were slippery things, and the ones I wanted felt too dangerous. She stepped closer, not much, just enough that I could smell the faint trace of her perfume. Nothing sweet, more like cedarwood, grounded, adult. Her presence pressed into me without a touch. We shouldn't, she didn't finish. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. I forced myself to look at her. Really look. The small crease near her mouth that only showed when she frowned. The faint lines under her eyes. The way her hand gripped the counter as though she needed something steady. For the first time, I saw past her confidence. She wasn't untouchable. She was terrified. And maybe so was I. My voice came out lower than I meant. If it feels wrong, why are you still here? Her lips parted, then closed. Her jaw tightened. She didn't answer. Couldn't. She just stared at me, long enough that I felt my pulse in my throat, in my hands, everywhere. Then she whispered, barely audible. Because leaving would hurt more than staying. And in that moment, everything between us changed. I thought about her words for days. Because leaving would hurt more than staying. They sank into me, like oil into fabric, staining everything I touched after. So when she came back, I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. What did surprise me was what she carried. Not her usual calm, not her neat composure, but a thin envelope, creased at the edges, clutched too tightly in her hand. She didn't say hello, just set it on the counter. I didn't mean to bring this, she said, almost defensive. It was in the glove box. I found it cleaning out papers. The envelope was addressed in faded ink. The handwriting was neat, old-fashioned. I didn't touch it. Is it? I started. It's nothing. She cut me off, too quick. Then, softer. It's not nothing. Her shoulders dropped as if she'd given away more than she intended. I waited. That was the thing with her. Silence worked better than questions. Finally, she said, it was a letter. From someone who mattered. She tapped the edge of the envelope, her fingers trembling just slightly. He wrote it before the accident. I didn't ask who he was. Didn't have to. The way she said before told me enough. He died. My voice cracked, embarrassingly unsteady. She nodded, not looking at me, just at the envelope. Years ago. But sometimes when I look at you, she stopped, pressing her lips together, shaking her head as though she'd said too much. I didn't breathe. The room felt heavier, like the air had been pulled tight around us. When you laugh, she continued suddenly, eyes still fixed on the letter. When you tilt your head, there are moments you remind me of him. And I hate it. Because it's not fair to you. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And it's not fair to me. The fluorescent light flickered above us. Outside, the sound of cars on wet pavement rolled by. I stood there, useless, hands braced on the counter to keep me from reaching for her. I'm not him, I said quietly. Her eyes lifted then, finally meeting mine. They were wet, not with tears, but with the shine of someone fighting too hard to hold them back. I know, she said. But the way her voice broke on the last word made it sound like she wasn't sure at all. We stood in the silence that followed, two people tethered by a ghost neither of us invited in. And before she turned to leave, she placed the envelope in my hand. Not asking me to read it, not asking me to keep it, just leaving it there, like a weight she couldn't carry anymore. Her fingers brushed mine, warm and shaking, before slipping away. I stared down at the letter long after she was gone, my pulse hammering, the echo of her words louder than anything I'd heard before. When I look at you, I see him. That was the moment I knew everything between us had shifted. The letter sat on my nightstand for 2 days before I opened it. His words weren't for me. But somehow, they made sense of her silences, her guarded pauses, the way she carried herself like someone who had already lost too much. When she came again, I didn't mention I'd read it. She didn't ask. We both knew. The shop was closed that evening, lights dimmed, the smell of oil lingering the way it always did. She sat on the low stool by the workbench, not her usual upright stance, but folded into herself, one arm resting on her knee. Neither of us pretended anymore. I shouldn't keep coming here, she said, voice low. It isn't fair. I leaned against the counter, wiping grease from my hands though there was nothing left to clean. Then why do you? Her laugh was soft, almost bitter. Because this is the only place I feel less alone. She looked down at her hands, fingers threading and unthreading as if they couldn't keep still. You remind me of him, yes. But you also remind me I'm still alive. The honesty landed between us, heavier than anything before. I didn't step closer. I didn't try to fill the silence. I just watched her, the rise and fall of her shoulders, the way her eyes seemed to be bracing for rejection that never came. Finally, I said, I'm not trying to replace him. Her head lifted, eyes locking with mine. I know, and I'm not asking for anything. My voice was steady, though my chest wasn't. Just to be here. The seconds stretched. She searched me, maybe for the lie, maybe for the naivety she expected to find. Instead, something in her eased, just slightly, but enough for me to see it. She stood then, slowly, and walked toward me. Not rushed, not hesitant either, just carrying all that weight in every step. When she stopped, we were close enough that I could see the faint scar near her hairline, the tiny fleck of gold in her left iris. Details I'd noticed before, but never this close. Her hand lifted, hovered as if she might touch me, then faltered. I didn't move. The choice had to be hers. After a breath, her palm landed lightly on my chest, not pressing, not pulling, just resting there, like she needed proof I was real. My heart thudded under her fingers, faster than it should have. We stayed that way. No kiss, no dramatic embrace. Just her hand, my breath, the quiet between us folding into something fragile and certain. She let out a long, shaking exhale. This isn't simple, she whispered. I nodded. No, but it's ours. Her forehead lowered against mine then, barely touching, a whisper of contact, tender and terrifying at once. We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. Because in the stillness of that moment, we both knew. Whatever came next, we had already crossed into something neither of us could undo. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like home. I think about that night more often than I admit. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. No confessions, no declarations. Just silence, steady breathing, the small weight of her hand against my chest. That was enough. More than enough. When people talk about love, they usually dress it up with fireworks and grand gestures. But what we found, what she gave me, wasn't about spectacle. It was about presence. About staying in a room when everything in you says to run. About letting silence speak the truth you're too afraid to say out loud. Looking back now, I realize I'd been chasing something I couldn't name. Longing, maybe. The kind that gnaws at you when you're young, when you believe every story has to end with a kiss to mean something. She taught me it doesn't. That sometimes, the most honest moments are the ones that don't ask for more. She changed me. Not by fixing me, not by filling some missing piece, but by showing me what it means to hold space for someone else's pain without trying to erase it. And maybe I changed her too. Not by replacing anyone she lost, not by pretending I could, but by being a reminder that she was still capable of feeling, of wanting, of being seen without the walls she'd built so carefully. We didn't fall into a neat story. There were no promises carved in stone. But from that night on, things were different. The way she looked at me, less guarded. The way I carried myself, less uncertain. We weren't pretending anymore. Sometimes, we still ask each other in different ways, what are we doing? The answer shifts. Some days it's clear, some days it isn't. But what I've learned, what she's taught me, is that not knowing doesn't make it less real. It makes it human. Because love, I've come to understand, isn't always about possession. It's not about forever. It's about the courage to stand in the same silence with another person and not flinch. To see them, not as who they were, not as who you want them to be, but as they are, right now, fragile and flawed, and still here. And that's enough. More than enough. So when she asked me once again, half teasing, half serious, why you? I gave her the only answer I'll ever have. Because you chose me first. And she didn't argue. She just smiled, tired, knowing, alive. If this story has stayed with you, if it made you pause, think, or feel something real, tell me in the comments. What does love mean to you in its quietest form? Because sometimes, the smallest answers are the ones that change everything.